For a knight to rise to the rank of master, they need to break the existing stereotype completely, and it must be done with a sword. But the legendary spear knight smashed tradition to become a master knight without wielding a sword. This luminary figure is Joshua Sanders, the great hero in the vast Igrant content, who immediately stopped the war of the Avalon Empire. But in the current situation, history's greatest spear knight is in a dire situation, and the blood is gushing out of his mouth. 4 men and a woman encircle him, and in their midst, an older man dressed in a white robe cruelly taunts the legendary spear knight for his vulnerability at this pivotal juncture. The one cloaked in a black robe that obscures half his visage comments that for a warrior who is extremely enthusiastic about mana, magic power, and divine power are paradoxically antagonistic because both collide inside the body. Addressing Joshua, he queries whether he had been an ordinary individual because this impact would have already ushered him into the embrace of death. Meanwhile, the protagonist kneels in pain and ponders why he is saying all that. Furthermore, he claims that he never once desired to steal the throne and didn't spare a single thought on such a thing. Joshua clarifies that he just wanted to show the world the greatness of the weapon known as the spear. He wanted to ease the grievance of being the son of a concubine and to help his master and his one and only friend. He had dreamt of a lifetime devoted to safeguarding the Avalon Empire Emperor's reign, shielding the realm with his unwavering presence. The master of the Tower of Magic, Evergrant, steps ahead, stating that there are beings that are a great danger to this world just by existing. While Joshua gnashes his teeth with ire, the man adds that the civil war is over, and the Emperor envisions an ascent to the pinnacle of authority, where he can enact his ambitions without impediment. Moreover, he reveals that Joshua is the one person who instills fear in the Emperor. Egrant remarks that even martial artists who have spent their entire lives researching mana take decades to cover a single small dagger and sword aura. However, Joshua can completely cover that massive spear the size of 2 people in an aura. This leads him to contemplate the extensive tally of adversaries he must have vanquished with that spear. The orb the man holds begins to emit a radiant gleam while Egrant claims that he knows Joshua has transcended another formidable wall. Joshua is aware that orb should have been within the ruins of Ammon, prompting him to wonder about its acquisition. A middle-aged knight stepped forth, asserting that he feared Joshua and that the spear made him feel unwell just by looking at it, thinking that the spear might appear and stab him. He confesses that he grew paranoid because of it. However, Joshua longed to respond, yet his lips remained resolutely sealed. Egrant feigns to thank him for everything until now, as it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have been here today. And for that, he bowed deeply to express his gratitude. Then in stark contrast, the man wearing a malicious grin whispered a parting message, addressing the old companion with a sinister tone. Joshua tumbles down on the ground, and blood profusely spills out of his mouth, while the Avalon Empire's Emperor Caesar von Britain averts his gaze, asserting that he cannot witness his best friend's last moments. Addressing Caesar Britain, Juhak yells not to think this is the end of it. Meanwhile, a magic explosion circle glimmer on the ground. It is an explosive magic circle with the power to annihilate everything within a 50-meter radius. At this speed, the protagonist realizes he has 5 minutes at the most. Nevertheless, he deems the time frame inconsequential. The gradually intensifying light makes his heart pound, and he concludes that the legendary Spear Knight is a false title now. He is in despair for being betrayed by his friend and considers himself a second-rate knight that will die namelessly in this forest. Amid the chaos, his attention is drawn to his crimson spear. Lukia, known as the Grim Reaper of the battlefield, emits a radiant gleam energy. He desperately crawls to grasp it and thinks that a special strength would be hidden inside it. But to think that it would show that strength at this moment. Like a possessed man, he desperately stretched his hands toward the spear on the floor. Joshua choked down the pain, resolute in believing that taking action now would end his suffering. He sighed triumphantly when his hands finally met the spear. In an instant, a bright flash accompanied by a thundering boom. The magic circle exploded with an earth-shattering bang, and everything disappeared with a violent roar. The Grand Duke of Avalon Empire, the land of knights, Joshua Sanders, met an empty fate that goes against his fame as the undefeated Spear Knight. Later, Joshua stumbles on a haystack and notices this is a horse stable. He contemplates how he survived that massive explosion and why his hands are tiny. A thought hits his mind, and he rushes toward the well and sees his reflection in a bucket full of water. He cannot believe that his body got younger, but as he looks around, he comprehends that this is where he used to live. Soon he realizes that he has returned to his past, and a smug smile crosses his lips as he perceives this is another opportunity to rewrite his history. With a slightly eerie expression, he thinks about Caesar von Britain, asserting that this life will unfold differently. While he stands there, 3 boys come up, asserting what he is doing here and why he's not attending to the task of cleaning horse manure, as previously instructed. Joshua recognizes that those guys are Agnes Dutchy's personal troops. One of the boys, Lloyd, expresses frustration, urging Joshua to respond when spoken to. Another boy named Rolf sarcastically asks his companion if he has forgotten that Joshua is mute. Meanwhile, the protagonist remembers that he pretended he couldn't talk since he would get hit more if he opened his mouth. The boys mockingly remark about not having seen Lucia, a maid, for some time. One of them hushes the other, suggesting it wouldn't bode well if the Duke were to find out, as he occasionally inquires about her whereabouts. Joshua becomes sad to hear their comments about his mother, Lucia, the exclusive maid of the Agnes Duchy. He is painfully reminded that he is the illegitimate child of Lucia, the maid whom Duke Agnes forcibly held. Aware of this fact, the personal troops taunt him maliciously, exploiting his noble lineage as a source of venomous amusement, particularly the 3 formidable individuals standing before him. Joshua harbors a deep-seated pledge for the future to exact revenge on these tormentors, ensuring that one day, they will face the consequences of their actions. The boys continue to mock his mother, and one brandishes his finger at him, asserting that who else will be here at this remote stale, excluding Joshua. Lloyd remarks on Duchess Vanessa's words that she will take responsibility even if they get rid of Lucia, and her illegitimate kid discreetly. He thinks it's the best timing to get rid of them. But Lucia isn't there, so they decide to amuse themselves by toying with Joshua. Meanwhile, rage courses through Joshua's veins as he firmly resolves not to allow those brats who insulted his mother to escape without consequences. He clenches his fist and contemplates whether the approach he's about to take will yield the desired results. The mana technique he has learned is distinct from conventional methods, and he wonders if his execution will diverge from the norm before he returns. He discovered the mana technique at the ancient ruins with his favorite spear Lukia, as it could reach the peak quickly because of the amazing impact that could shake the world. The important thing is that the mana technique he practiced had a completely different operation method, as it isn't done by accumulating mana in the mana hole that is located under the abdomen normally, but by using the mana scattered in the surroundings. Unrestricted by the confines of the conventional mana reservoir, he could channel mana precisely where required and ignite it all at once. Consequently, Joshua could bypass the necessity of creating a mana reservoir, a process others labored through for years to achieve. In tandem, Gort strides forward, brandishing a baton intending to strike Joshua, and asserts that he won't be able to rein in his strength. Despite the chilling threat in Gort's voice, Joshua kept his eyes shut and didn't respond. They deride him, assuming he has succumbed to their intimidation, yet Joshua remains aware that he needs to manipulate a small quantity of mana before his return. It took him a decade to achieve this level of control, but now he already knows how. The menacing gaze of Joshua enrages the brat, who then lunges to assault him. However, to their surprise, the protagonist knocks him down with a soul move that startles the remaining delinquents. Joshua then feels something really sticky and disturbing under his abdomen, which should be completely empty. He is sure it was something he couldn't feel before his return. Lloyd unleashes his sword, asserting that Joshua is crazy because he wants to die. Despite being aware of the danger of facing a trained soldier wielding a long sword, Joshua calculates that if he can incapacitate Lloyd, the most cautious of the trio, there's a strong likelihood that Rolf won't engage in an attack. Joshua remains unfazed when Lloyd attempts to assault him, and he evades it easily. In return, he smacks the delinquent's face with a handful of mana, causing him to fumble on the ground with blood gushing profusely through his mouth. Rolf finds it crazy as he doesn't expect that bastard who can't even talk was hiding such formidable power. Meanwhile, Joshua remains in contemplation, puzzled by the intensity of pain he's experiencing despite employing only a modest amount of mana. He knows that Rolf was promoted to Centurion with his wit more than his skills, and he isn't better than Lloyd and Gort. Nonetheless, Joshua acknowledges that Rolf, even with his skills, poses a potential threat, and Joshua resolves not to reveal any vulnerability in this situation. With a stern posture, Joshua asserts that from this moment onwards, anyone, including the Centurions, who dares to insult his mother will face his unwavering resolve under the name Joshua. His stern demeanor and gaze shiver down Rolf's spine, and he immediately retreats to save himself. As the delinquents flee, Joshua's strength wanes. He tumbles onto the ground and eventually succumbs to unconsciousness. The next day, the bizarre rumors spread among the Duke's soldiers like wildfire, and it's been the talk of every mouth that Joshua, the mute kid of the stables, beat the crap out of the 3 centurions. At the courtyard beside the residence, groups of servants were gathered at the corner of the courtyard entrance and chattered as they worked. The janitor shares the rumor about Joshua pretending to be mute all this time on purpose. Among the speculations, a man muses how the young master Joshua managed to overpower the centurions despite being over 5 years younger than young master Babel. However, Baran remains skeptical of the rumors, as he thinks the story got exaggerated and asks whether they think the mute kid who got abandoned by his family a few days ago could single-handedly defeat the centurions. The elder among them asserts that if the rumors are true, the standings of Duke Agnes' children in succession may change. Baran confidently asserts that even the esteemed Duke Agnes, who currently holds mastery, achieved Mana user status at 16. In comparison, the young master Babel, at a mere 14 years old, has already become a Mana user. He concludes that this early accomplishment indicates Babel's exceptional genius must be an outstanding genius who will surpass even Duke Agnes one day. Joshua steps in out of nowhere, and, with a firm stance, he directs his words towards Baran, commanding him to convey to the Duke that Joshua von Agnes has arrived. On the other hand, at Duke Agnes's workplace, Rolls kneels in front of him and discloses the entire story of their confrontation with Joshua. The master recognizes him and then asks about his affiliation, to which he responds that he is from the 29th Griezmann's battalion. Duke then commands him to bring him that suit of armor. After witnessing that, he ponders whether Joshua was the one who did this to the armor. Chiffon, the master's adjutant, warns him to think carefully before answering because he will not be forgiven if he utters even the slightest lie. However, Rolls vehemently insists he isn't lying. The master can't comprehend the situation and inquires Chiffon about Joshua's age, to which he informs that he is 9 years old. In response, the Duke asserts that destroying a suit of armor made of orc leather with mere physical strength at that age would be possible only if Joshua had employed mana somehow. Apologizing for the discourtesy, Chiffon intervenes abruptly to state his viewpoint, and flatly dismisses the possibility, asserting that there is no record in the continent's history of anyone being able to effectively employ mana in an actual combat scenario at the age of 9. He contemplates the potential that young Master Joshua might become an unparalleled genius in history, pointing out that even a highly accomplished B-rank knight would require substantial talent to envelop their hands with mana. Thus, he firmly states his disbelief in the notion that a 9-year-old like young Master Joshua could have executed such an act successfully. Chiffon then exclaims, his frustration evident, that it appears far more plausible that these individuals were gripped by fear that their mistreatment of the young master would be exposed. He contends that they concocted a nonsensical excuse using their feeble minds. He implores the master to grant him permission to take Rolls outside and administer a public lesson, aiming to rectify the declining discipline within their troop. Despite Chiffon's accusations, Rolls persists in asserting the veracity of his previous account, maintaining that Chiffon's assertions are untrue, and that the details he previously shared are indeed accurate. Chiffon advances toward Rolls, his anger palpable as he questions Rolls' audacity to raise his voice before the Duke and urges him to reveal the truth. Rolls is terrified because of his rage but persists that he isn't lying. Duke Agnes halts him from further acting against that guy and declares they will discover the truth once they meet the person in question. Instead of calling him over, he plans to meet Joshua for the first time in forever. Captain Chiffon contemplates the Duke's unprecedented action of personally meeting the son of a concubine. He reflects that the Duke has never displayed such interest, even in young Master Babel, renowned as the Empire's greatest genius. Duke Agnes inquires where Joshua is, and the captain informs him that he has arrived and must be inside the first floor's waiting room. Then, the Duke urges him to lead him toward Joshua. On the other hand, while walking through the Agnes mansion's corridor, Babel notices Joshua and ponders what that bastard is doing there. Simultaneously, Joshua is captivated by a portrait of the current Emperor of Avalon, Marcus van Britten, hanging on a wall. The sight of the portrait triggers a surge of anger within him due to the uncanny resemblance between Marcus and Caesar van Britten, fueling his determination to exact revenge on him. Suddenly, Babel lunges forward in an attempt to strike Joshua's face, voicing his frustration at being seemingly ignored. However, Joshua's swift reflexes allow him to evade the blow skillfully, and he fiercely grasps his outstretched fist, making him tremble in pain. Babel clenches his teeth, wondering whether the rumors are true, and plans to use the mana as he won't go down without a fight. Soon, Duke Agnes steps in there, asserting what he is thinking of doing. Babel abruptly quits his plan and kneels in deference to greet his father. When the man repeats his question, Babel responds that they are exchanging heartwarming greetings. The Duke's expression becomes stern as he shifts his gaze to Joshua, who affirms the statement with a nod. Chiffon becomes enraged at Joshua's nonchalant behavior and brandishes his blade to punish the juvenile. The Duke of Agnes halts Chiffon and urges Joshua that his gaze is filled with hostility and spite. However, he abruptly lowers his gaze, contemplating that portrait reminded him of that scumbag's face he despises and has ignited an overwhelming surge of anger that he struggles to control. Joshua inwardly realizes that this situation isn't favorable because Agnes doesn't easily let go of the people who show hostility before him, even if it's no different if the hostile person in question is his child. Duke Agnes asserts that Joshua should approach him if he has regained his composure. He declares his intention to personally verify whether Joshua is genuinely capable of using mana or not. Babel, who had been silently observing, is taken aback by this question and ponders how could someone like Joshua, whom he regards as lowly, be capable of using mana. Babel finds the idea utterly implausible, considering his status as the son of a servant and his significantly younger age. The adjutant respectfully advises the Duke against engaging in such a futile act. However, the Duke remains unmoved by the counsel and, with a tinge of solemnness in his tone, instructs Joshua to come over. Filled with tension, the protagonist's face pales, realizing that Duke Agnes is one of the 5 masters of the vast empire. He is far more sensitive to mana than others, and if he finds some abnormal symptoms in his body, his plan will go down the drain. While Joshua is drowning in his doubts, Duke Agnes, in the blink of an eye, grasps his fist and gives a suspicious look. Joshua realizes that if the mana-sensitive Duke Agnes finds something he doesn't know, his plans must all be adjusted to prevent jeopardizing. Agnes analyzes deeply and, with intense composure, asserts that no mana exists. Babel sarcastically smirks at him as if to say, "Of course, there should be none." Meanwhile, Captain Chiffon comments that mana shouldn't have been present from the beginning. But the leader clarifies that he's not referring to the mana whole. He asserts that a basic amount of mana should exist in every human. He goes on to speculate that even civilians and creatures like monsters possess mana, yet Joshua is an exception, as he shows no mana presence at all. This piques Duke Agnes' interest, as a complete lack of mana typically signifies an undead sustained by demonic power. Duke Agnes asserts that there was something where the mana hole should have been. He detected some sticky mass that gave off bad energy. He proclaims his decision to closely monitor Joshua from this point onward, a declaration that leaves the protagonist startled and apprehensive. Chiffon asks cautiously that if the child has congenital mana disorder, there is a higher chance that the rumors are false and claims to behead those 3 centurions for spreading false rumors. However, the leader halts him from taking such drastic measures, reminding him that the centurion is also an asset of the dukedom, so punishing them based on uncertain information may not be wise. He then commands Joshua to live in the mansion for a while, as there are plenty of empty rooms. Babel attempts to voice his objections, but when Duke Agnes sternly questions him about any issues, Babel reluctantly admits there are none. The Duke advises the adjutant Chiffon to teach Joshua the basic knight lessons and, if he shows talent, teach him the Crimson Knight's method for using mana. Chiffon humbly tries to remind him that Joshua doesn't have mana, but the leader remarks that there is plenty of time to find out if they must wait and see. The Duke asks Joshua that he will forward to his return next year from Acadia. After a while, Chiffon escorts Joshua to his room, pondering the accuracy of the rumors surrounding Joshua's inability to speak. He suspects Joshua's lack of visible happiness despite the significant advantages he has gained, then asks if he needs anything he can call him. With a sigh, Joshua lies down on the bed, feeling a strong desire to fall asleep immediately. Suddenly, Duke's words about looking forward to him next year echo in his mind. Joshua ponders whether, by returning next year, Duke Agnes might be referring to his return from the capital city of Avalon, the imperial castle Arcadia. He knows Duke Agnes spends most of the year in Acadia's Golden Castle, and he most likely returned to the fief for a rest. Watching his fist, Joshua wonders if the Duke has discovered something even he himself isn't aware of. Whatever it may be, he considers it dangerous for Duke Agnes to possess the knowledge he lacks. Soon, he casts aside his restlessness and steps down from the bed, reiterating that his primary goal is to reclaim his original strength to exact revenge. At midnight, he cautiously peers out the window and then decisively slips out of the mansion. Considering that using this amount of mana isn't too much of a burden, He contemplates that he might be able to regain his former strength quicker than anticipated. Suddenly, excruciating pain courses through his body as the malevolent energy mass within his mana hole terminates. He perceives the presence of something that seems to be suppressing the conflicting energies, but he's unable to definitively ascertain whether it's holy power or a demonic force. Soon, he discovers it's his favorite spear, Lukia's powerful force inside his body and restraining the two energies. The spear soothes his bizarre condition, and as his pain subsides, he rushes onward. On the other hand, in a dwelling, those three centurions are harassing the concubine, Lucia. Filled with fury, Gord unleashes his sword, expressing his frustration that her son's actions have tarnished their reputation. In a desperate attempt to defend herself, Lucia bites down on Lloyd's arm, causing him to release his grip on her neck, causing him to tumble her away. He then pulls her hair while Gort urges him to hold her tight. Rolls halts his companion to think again, pondering what if that kid finds out again. Gort smacks his hand aside, reminding him of their sole mission to half-kill that bastard by harming his mother. Then yells that the Duchess has already assured them she will take responsibility for everything and urges Rolls to leave if he's so fearful, while Lloyd mocks him too, referring to him as a scaredy cat. As they torment her, Joshua steps in with a surge of fiery anger. The brats jeer at him for his delayed arrival, yet Rolls intervenes, cautioning them against mocking Joshua since he's no longer the person they once knew. After a brief silence, Joshua urges someone to appear, surprising the delinquents who wonder who he's addressing. Lloyd steps ahead, asserting that he will send him to hell, but the protagonist remains unfazed and repeats his call for the person to come out. Suddenly, Cain jumps in out of nowhere and wonders how Joshua can sense his presence. Joshua is certain that the cross mark is one of the 3 knight orders under Duke Agnes, then wonders a knight from the Order of Crimson Knight has followed him and whether Chiffin is up to this. The Centurion guys greet Cain, but he pays no attention to them and walks up to Joshua, contemplating whether this child is the rumored child of a concubine. With a stern demeanor, Joshua addresses Cain, stating that a soldier attempted to harm a lady of the Duke's household and asks how such situations are typically handled according to the military law of the Duke's house. Cain can't comprehend the overwhelming force that makes him unable to deny it. He abruptly turns around, draws his sword in compliance with the command, and asserts the necessity of immediate punishment. Cain lunges forward, launching an unexpected attack against the group of Centurion operatives. Quickly and decisively, he gains the upper hand over Lloyd, overpowering him with surprising strength. Despite this, Gord attempts to fight back, but Cain's dominance proves unyielding, leaving him unable to counter for an extended period. In a sudden motion, he swings his blade to strike a fatal blow to Rolf's head. However, this time, Joshua's commanding voice cuts through the air, compelling him to halt his deadly action. Rolf begs for mercy, but Cain sternly warns him to cease talking if he wishes to prolong his fleeting life. The protagonist steps ahead, repeating his words to stop him, but Cain reasons that he is only giving an immediate punishment for putting the Duke's wife in danger. Joshua realizes that he is one of the Third Knights who are well known in the duchy but is part of the Crimson Knights, known as the weakest of the knights, and there is a high chance that he's the youngest of the Crimson Knights. He contemplates that if he is put on him to observe, he is sure that he is the strongest among the C-rank knights, seeing as how he dominated the Centurions with only 1 or 2 swings of his sword. Joshua asserts to let him ask one thing before Cain proceeds and urges who his master is. When Cain responds that it's Duke Agnes, the protagonist sternly points himself out and inquires who he is. Cain senses the familiar intensity in the pressure and fierce gaze, reminiscent of someone he's acquainted with. Joshua commands him to sheath his sword, and the guy abruptly acts on his command. Rolf simultaneously bows down to express his gratitude for being saved and pledges to serve loyalty to Joshua. However, Joshua menacingly remarks that he doesn't need his dedication from someone like Rolf and will never let anyone who has laid a hand on him or his family. Moreover, he instructs him to recount everything he witnessed today to the other soldiers, warning that if anyone ever engages in similar actions, he will personally mete out severe consequences, then urge him to get lost if he has understood what he said, causing the brat to rush. Cain inquires if he is the same Earl he recalls from his memories, to which Joshua sardonically finishes the sentence, labeling himself as the master's illegitimate child who can't talk or the stable dung peddler, causing Cain to feel a deep sense of shame. Cain adds that all the soldiers allocated to the Agnes Duchy can choose their master whom they will serve for the rest of their lives when they turn 23 years old, so he expresses his desire to watch over Joshua apart from his duty. The protagonist thinks it would have been the right decision for Cain to serve the duchy's treasure, Babel von Agnes, rather than him if he had looked at the future, then smirks and, with a sarcastic grin, refers to Cain as eccentric. Meanwhile, his mother, the most beautiful lady, Lukia, calls him, and he rushes to meet her. As she embraces him, he bursts into tears, asserting that he will protect her from now on. Later at night, he thanks the heavens for giving him another chance to return to his younger days, tainted with regret. Determinedly, he vows to change his path this time around, shedding the timidity that once defined him not as Joshua von Agnes, the disdained offspring of a stable worker, but as Joshua Sanders, the most formidable spear in the annals of the continent's history. On the other hand, at Agnes Duchy's mansion, Chiffon briefs the Duke that Rebecca has paid a visit, and is in the reception room and reveals that Count Rebecca didn't come alone this time as he came with Miss Iceland, to which the Duke with a deep sigh wonder whether he wants to put an end to this. An uncomfortable visitor who has suddenly come for Count Agnes, Count Fonselgin Rebecca, though he is of lower status compared to the Duke, is someone who can't be disregarded because of his influence within the Empire. His daughter Iceland Jin Rebecca is one of the talented people being obstructed carefully alongside Babel. She is recognized as a prodigious magic user, having entered the second tier of classes at 9. In a world where some are cursed with the inability to wield mana due to their genetics, others are blessed with an innate proficiency in its manipulation, the recipients of mana's favor. Iceland stands as one who has been bestowed with the blessing of mana. The blessing of mana, often referred to as the god's finest gift to magicians, endows its recipient with the ability to sense and interact with mana without having to learn it. Chiffon proceeds to apprise the master that Earl Babel will soon reach the age of 15 in the upcoming year, which likely has him in a state of anticipation, considering that his official coming-of-age ceremony is less than 3 years away. The Duke ponders the matter, reflecting on the presence of Lady Cheryl and how it might factor into Babel's circumstances. The 5 duchies of the Avalon Empire wielded significant influence within the empire, each in their distinct manner. Lady Cheryl, a member of the Font family, secured a duchy status based purely on their considerable wealth. The adjutant notes that, as he previously mentioned, considering the Font duchy, it might be more prudent to choose Lady Cheryl, to which the Duke concurs, stating that he always feels the same thing. But that's unfortunate. The Duke of Agnes possesses an insatiable appetite for talents, rivaling his thirst for military might. He's an individual who appraises others solely based on their abilities, such is the nature of the ruler of Agnes Duchy. Suddenly, the Duke stands still and inquires about Joshua's well-being and reveals that he told Joshua he would give Iceland to him. His revelation takes Chiffon aback, contemplating the match between Lady Iceland, who has been bestowed with the blessing of mana, to the mana-disabled Joshua, who has been afflicted with the mana curse. In contrast, Joshua is standing near a partially ruined palace with broken pathways and dilapidated towers. Joshua ascends the old cliff located north of the Agnes Duchy's garden. Before he returned, he used to climb this place because he wanted to be closer to his deceased mother, and there he discovered a hidden tunnel where he found Lukia, his cherished spear. He nips at his thumb, allowing blood drops to drip onto the ground. Suddenly, an incandescent portal materializes in a surprising turn of events, casting its radiant glow over the surroundings. He enters the gateway and lands in a different world, where he finds a partially ruined palace with broken pathways and dilapidated towers. He steps into the castle, wondering whether it's the same temple because when he first discovered this place, it wasn't in ruins like this, and Lukia was located on the altar in the center of the temple, wrapped in chains. However, this time there is just a metal stick instead of Lukia. He steps toward the metal rod, and when he grasps it, a sudden surge of sparks envelops him. Soon, everything turns into a pure white landscape, and he is taken aback to see the metal rod hanging in the air. To his astonishment, the baton responds, asserting it isn't a mere metallic stick but rather the demonic god's artifact, Lukia. This revelation catches Joshua off guard as he grapples with the realization that the spear he wielded in countless battles was, in fact, a relic of a demonic god. He notices that Lukia's appearance has changed, and amid his contemplation, Joshua ponders whether this transformation occurred because the spear journeyed back in time with him. However, his thoughts are interrupted by the baton's assertion that the concept of time doesn't apply here. It further imparts that 2 energies within Joshua's body will gradually erode his lifespan over time, prompting a deep sense of concern and urgency. The baton advises Joshua to swiftly regain his initial strength, emphasizing that this is the sole method to quell their restlessness. It explains that this approach will enable him to harness the 2 serene energies within him. He must strive to attain the magic spearmanship stage 4 to achieve this. This guidance underscores the importance of his journey toward restoring balance and control. Joshua recalled that the ancient spear technique he was learning, the magic spearmanship, this spear technique he discovered with his mana technique had incredible potency. In the realm, all the knights of the Ignorant content used swords as their only weapon, and spears were widely considered weak and crude toys. However, before his return, only a handful of people could rival him in battle. Back then, he had reached the pinnacle of magic spearmanship at stage 5. If prowess were measured in ranks, a rank knights could fashion swords from mana, while those deemed masters were accorded the illustrious absolute rank. Even within the 8-tiered hierarchy of the magic spearmanship, Joshua stood at stage 5, reigning as the Empire's paramount knight. Now he mused that achieving stage 4 could place him on par with the mightiest B-rank knights. The attainment of this level shouldn't prove excessively challenging, yet his concern lay in the constraint of time. Given his current standing, training his mana from the ground up presented a formidable challenge, casting a shadow of melancholy over his aspirations. Lukia's reassurance blankets Joshua's worries, promising he can employ mana without harmful consequences up to a certain threshold as long as it remains by his side. Joshua abruptly ponders whether it's possible, to which Lukia encourages him to polish his skills. It insisted that once he attained the pinnacle and Lukia regained its full potential, Joshua would surely achieve his dreams. Abruptly, a burst of light emerges, transporting Joshua back to the central altar within the temple, where he gets that metal baton Lukia. He firmly grasps Lukia, recalling its words that as long as he has it by his side, he should be able to use mana to a certain extent. Joshua closed his eyes, allowing the mana from his surroundings to flow into him. He easily activated the first stage of magic spearmanship, which enabled him to absorb considerable mana from the air around him, an unparalleled skill on the continent. With this stage of spearmanship, he can concentrate mana in a single spot and launch forward to pierce in a single explosive burst. He counts it as the beginning and plans to train hard to take everything away from Caesar Van Britten. On the other hand, in Agnes Duchy's guest reception room, the receptionist announces the arrival of Duke Agnes. Cheryl Dyfont, daughter of House Font, greets the Duke while he wonders what brings her here so late. In response to his inquiry, Count Cox Ron Vajan, a vassal of House Font, apologizes for Cheryl's persistent insistence that led to their sudden visit. Cox is a prominent vassal of House Font and oversees their financial matters. The Duke assures him there's no need to apologize and mentions that it's unfortunate how seldom they get to meet despite residing in the same city, making this encounter opportune. Amidst their conversation, she playfully quips that she's heard rumors of Babel attaining the rank of a C-rank knight, and she amusingly contemplates the idea of establishing herself as a prodigy too, which startles the Duke. Cox abruptly apologizes, stating that she is immature. However, the Duke's response is magnanimous. He reassures Cox that her behavior doesn't bother him and affirms that it's perfectly acceptable for a girl her age to behave in such a spirited manner. Duke Agnes then turns around to greet Fonsel and express his apologies for momentarily forgetting their presence. Iceland Jin Rebecca, Count Fonsel Jin Rebecca's daughter, greets the Duke. Meanwhile, Cheryl is annoyed by Iceland's presence while Cox tries to calm her down. She then inquires about the rumor she's heard regarding Sir Duke's illegitimate child defeating 3 centurions, expressing her curiosity about its accuracy. Cox reluctantly raises his voice to refrain her from speaking oddly, but she responds that she is just asking because she is curious. Chiffin informs Lady Cheryl that it's just a rumor, and unveils that young Master Joshua suffers from a frail constitution and bears the burden of the mana curse. Chiffin asserts that given these factors, Joshua is unlikely to have defeated 3 centurions. This revelation startles Count Rebecca, who ponders the validity of such information regarding the second Earl's mana curse. In response, the Duke invites Rebecca to assess Joshua, given his standing as a 5th-class magician in the Empire. He suggests that a magician's heightened sensitivity to mana might offer better insight than a knight's. Rebecca concurs and plans to use this opportunity to score some points with Duke Agnes. Chiffin intervenes and humbly proposes to the Duke that they should confirm Joshua's condition to ascertain the truth behind the rumors. He suggests that they could investigate if there's a natural deficiency and validate the accuracy of the rumor. The Duke sternly urges how he plans on confirming it, to which the adjutant asks that if he gives the order, he can summon an appropriate knight from his banner to compete with Joshua. Duke Agnes assert whether he wants a knight of the Order of the Crimson Knights to compete with a 9-year-old opponent. The adjutant reasons that if Joshua's strength matches the rumors, the competitor must be at that level, and conveniently, they have a fitting individual within their ranks. With a vicious look, he then asks that if the Duke sees it in person, he will be fully satisfied. The next day, Chiffin summons Kane to his office, reflecting on the report he received regarding the incident involving the Centurions. Kane affirms that the report is accurate. Chiffin then acknowledges that according to military law, he holds the authority to carry out instant punishment, but he questions whether Kane believes this course of action was hastened. Upon Kane's explanation that they intended to cause harm to a lady from the Duke's household, the adjutant, Chiffin, becomes infuriated, speculating whether those individuals dared to target Lady Vanessa. Corrected by Kane that it was not Lady Vanessa but Lady Lucia, the Duke's second wife, Chiffin leans back in his seat and questions the necessity of incapacitating 2 Centurions for the sake of a concubine. The banner guy, exuding confidence, firmly states that Lady Lucia holds a position of respect within the Duke's household and that she is beyond the reach of ordinary soldiers. He emphasizes that their actions were both an affront and a brazen challenge to the Duke's authority. Chiffin, moved by his confident demeanor, urges that they will overlook this later, but for now, there is a job for him to do next. Then reveals that today Kane has to spar with young Master Joshua, which startles the Knight of the Order of the Crimson Knights. Additionally, the adjutant explains that through this incident, they aim to determine whether the young master is indeed burdened with a mana curse. He expresses confidence that the outcome will reaffirm the presence of natural mana or its deficiency. However, he notes that Duke Agnes remains unconvinced, and if this uncertainty persists, it could potentially obstruct the progress of young Master Babel. Kane responds with doubt about whether he believes young Master Babel might be sidelined due to this situation, to which Chiffin rebukes him for talking nonsense. He firmly asserts that young Master Babel is an unparalleled genius, a rarity not easily found anywhere on the continent. He questions if Kane truly believes Babel could be bested by a mere pebble. In response, Kane secretly acknowledges that the pebble he observed was a meteor capable of tearing across the vast expanse of the sky before crashing down to the earth. Chiffin commands Kane to discreetly infuse mana into Joshua during their sparring session, ensuring no one notices. He explains that if Joshua is indeed afflicted with the curse of mana, his body will reject the mana injection. In the case of a mana-cursed individual receiving a mana infusion, it would act like poison, leading to death within 10 days. His intentions stun Kane. He knows that the adjutant is biased towards young Master Babel's side, but he can't believe he could show his true self this explicitly. Chiffin then commands him to wait in the military armament because the Duke and Count will soon be brought there. While waiting in the apartment, Kane contemplates that even though it's an order from his direct superior, he plans that as long as he is watching over young Master Joshua, however, he has no plans to harm him. Meanwhile, the protagonist arrives there and confirms that he heard they are sparring, to which Kane concurs, stating that it's to confirm Earl's abilities and it's Sir Duke plans to order a spar. Joshua smirks while gazing at his fist, asserting that the Duke has recognized some of his abilities, so he plans to take it on. Kane urges the protagonist not to worry about it and clarifies that he has no intention of sparring against them. In response, the protagonist retorts that Kane's statement makes him laugh or wonder whether Kane wants to gauge his abilities, which Kane abruptly denies. Joshua confidently states that the right to choose the master is an exclusive authority to knights. However, Joshua has the authority to choose his subordinate, and has no plans to entrust his back to someone as insignificant and weak as that, which stuns Kane. Then assert that Kane should do his best if he wants to see the real self of Joshua. Soon, Duke Agnes and his guests arrive at the military armament, pondering whether they have introduced themselves. While Kane greets the Duke, Chiffin thinks Joshua has no etiquette towards Duke Agnes. However, Joshua greets the Duke as well, which impresses the Duke, who ponders that he doesn't remember separately teaching him etiquettes. But he is good at this, while Chiffin seems frustrated. Joshua remarks that he just learned from watching. The Duke wonders whether he knows what is going on, to which the protagonist remarks that he was told that the Duke wanted to test him. Chiffin intervenes, remarking that there seems to be a misunderstanding because this is not the test from the Duke but his consideration because he wants to examine and classify Joshua's handicap to cure his ailment properly. At that time, Joshua realizes that the Chiffin bastard is on Babel's side, orchestrating this situation to kill him. The Duke asks Kane whether he is ready, to which the guy concurs, asserting that he is ready to spar. Duke Agnes assert that Guy is misunderstanding something because Joshua's spar opponent is not him. It's Joshua's older brother Babel. With a malicious grin, Babel feigns that this older brother cherishes him. However, Joshua is aware of his underlying motives. The Duke informs that they will be using wooden swords for training since it's only competitive training. Babel abruptly grasps one and casually brandishes it at Joshua, stating that he has no intentions of doing his absolute best. The protagonist grins as he knows that Babel and Chiffon are trying to make a show because they want to kill him, so he plans to show them properly what showmanship is. He breaks a wooden mop to get a stick and declares that it's enough for him, which startles the Duke and the adjutant. Lady Cheryl scoffs at his choice, finding it hilarious as he selects a mere stick for sparring against a mana user. Chiffon tells Joshua it isn't a joke and ponders what he plans to do with a stick like that. Duke Agnes halts the adjutant and asserts whether Joshua is sure about his choice, which the protagonist confidently concurs with. The Duke then commands everyone to have a seat and cautions Babel not to use mana. Babel urges his dad not to worry about it, considering that using mana on that stable cleaner guy would be a waste. Babel questions Joshua's intention to face him with a stick and mockingly suggests that a wooden rod is fitting for someone who used to clean horse excrement and can't even speak. The sparring begins with the Duke's signal, and the two opponents engage in a battle of strength. Joshua employs a subtle mana technique, catching his older brother off guard. However, Babel quickly regains his composure and dismisses Joshua's technique, asserting that Joshua might learn this technique somewhere, but it's futile. The protagonist contemplates that his brother is considered a C-rank knight but is simple and only has his speed. Seizing the opportunity, Joshua successfully manages to strike Babel's arm, who then attempts to manipulate his younger brother by belittling him as an illegitimate child who won't even be able to get his name on the ranks. However, Joshua remains focused and swiftly strikes Babel's stomach with his wooden baton. He then employs a mana burst which shatters Babel's wooden sword and startles the Fonsel Rebecca, who realizes it's mana. Now realizing that Joshua isn't as weak as he thought, Babel abruptly unleashes his sword, declaring that he can't accept it and that the title of Duchy's successor will only belong to him. Unfazed by the circumstances, he confronts Babel, boldly claiming that he will overcome the challenges the Duchy poses. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, the Duke abruptly halts them in a menacing tone from further confrontation, declaring that he will not forgive them if they continue to fight any longer. Meanwhile, Chiffon is stunned and can't comprehend that Joshua possessed mana at the age of 9 because this is the first time in history. In other words, it's a fantastic feat. Duke Agnes urged the adjutant whether he isn't satisfied yet. However, Chiffon still seems incredulous as he has never seen that before. Meanwhile, judging from whatever he has seen, Rebecca confirms that it indeed was mana, and it's not much compared to Earl Babel when considering the amount of mana. Still, it's a different type of mana than the one they know, especially regarding its concentration. All that happens takes them aback, while the Duke is impressed by Joshua for being able to use mana at the age of 9. Chiffon tries to intervene, but Duke Agnes sternly gazes at him, then addresses Joshua, informing him that he needs to discuss some matters, and instructs him to come to his room later that night, which startles Chiffon and Babel, while Joshua abruptly agrees. Amid all this, Babel clenches his fist tightly in frustration because his father, Duke Agnes, has never summoned anyone to his room before. He cannot fathom how a mere stable cleaner could turn into someone who commands such attention. Later at Agnes Duchy's guest room, Lady Cheryl jumps thrillingly, amused by all that happened in military armament. Despite Cox's attempts to placate her and encourage a composed demeanor, her amusement remains undiminished. The notion of a 9-year-old possessing mana strikes her as implausible and amusing. While acknowledging her initial reservations about Joshua's status as an illegitimate child, she declares her determination to make him a part of her world. Later, within the confines of Duchy's mansion, when Chiffon informs her about Babel's defeat, Emperor Marcus' older sister Duchess Agnes, Vanessa von Agnes, slaps him and urges him to tell again. Chiffon reaffirms that her son Babel was defeated by Joshua, inciting further rage from the Duchess, who delivers another blow to his face. She is astounded that the son of a concubine possesses mana and has surpassed Babel. She then inquires about the Duke's view on all that, to which the adjutant humbly responds that it seems that he will take Joshua to a CADI. He adds that since the Duke has seen Joshua's talent, he must want to keep Joshua next to him to observe him more. He alerts the Duchess that they will be put in a precarious situation if they let it be. However, she retorts that would never happen if the adjutant had properly fulfilled his responsibilities. Chiffon asserts there is no need to worry because he has a way of going about this, and she abruptly inquires what it is. He clarifies that it is just a hypothesis. However, he is sure that Duke Agnes might attempt to publicly declare Joshua as a C-rank mana user throughout the Empire, to which the Duchess asserts that he is still spouting nonsense. Furthermore, he states that not only the Duke but also the two counts also witnessed Joshua's prowess firsthand. And even if it weren't mana, the Duke would make him take the test to be knighted officially as a C-rank knight to check his mana in an actual fight through a battle with a royal knight. Upon learning about Joshua's upcoming battle with a knight, a spark of rivalry ignites in the Duchess's eyes, and she intends to contact her uncle for the first time in a while. On the other hand, a firm knock resonates on the door, and Joshua steps inside at the Duke's permission. When Joshua kneels to greet the Duke, he ponders who he is, and the protagonist responds that he is Joshua von Agnes. The Duke takes note of the considerable change in Joshua's appearance since their previous encounter, and Joshua acknowledges this observation by remarking that a significant time has indeed transpired. Duke Agnes then inquire whether he hates his father, but Joshua denies, asserting that in a situation where he needs to be wary of the royal castle, the Duke wouldn't have been able to expect much from him. He then urges that he has a request, and the Duke wonders whether he expects an apology. Joshua knows that a deceptive apology wouldn't mean anything in a cruel educational environment, so he clarifies that his request concerns being taken to Acadia. The Duke questions Joshua's certainty about his decision and seeks the rationale behind the request. Joshua confidently presents two reasons. Firstly, the succession to the duchy has been reserved for Babel until now, so to avert potential turmoil, it would be wise to remove him from the equation. As the Duke contemplates, he realizes that Joshua possesses more than just a battle talent if he had raised him systematically earlier. Joshua then proceeds to the second reason, affirming that it revolves around the Duke's inclination to retain him due to greed. He explains that attaining a level surpassing the Duke's own could potentially revitalize Agnes' duchy, elevating it to new heights. Such a feat might even lead to a situation where the duchy need not harbor concerns regarding the royal castle's influence. The Duke acknowledges that Joshua seems to imply that he possesses the potential to fulfill those expectations. Joshua confidently asserts his belief that he won't let the Duke down. Duke Agnes admires Joshua's audacity for speaking so boldly in front of him and contemplates if there is a way to do both things simultaneously. Joshua concurs, stating that he must consider sending him to the academy at Acadi. The noble children of the Avalon Empire must study at the academy at Acadi for 6 years, from 10 to 15 years old. It's even possible to graduate early for skilled professionals like Babel. The reason the royal castle made such a system is so that they can take the children hostage through the academy to hold the nobles' loyalty towards the royals in check and to win over outstanding talents. The Duke admits that he will be coming to the city with him. Also, he commits to teach Joshua personally if he is close by. Joshua recognizes this as a remarkable chance to learn swordsmanship from one of the 5 masters of the empire. Nonetheless, he points out that while the Duke excels in swordsmanship, he himself intends to specialize in using a spear as his weapon of choice. This declaration leaves the Duke taken aback, as he had been uncertain due to Joshua's utilization of a seemingly ineffectual stick during their one-on-one duel. In response, Duke Agnes channels an immense surge of mana directed at Joshua, questioning if he intends to wield a spear. The sheer magnitude of this mana force makes it challenging for Joshua to maintain his footing. However, as much as Agnes is proud of his sword, he also has much pride in his spear. Nonetheless, just as Agnes takes immense pride in his swordsmanship, Joshua, too, possesses a deep-seated sense of pride in his proficiency with a spear. With resolve, the protagonist proclaims his intent to vanquish any obstacles that cross his path using a spear, regardless of whether they belong to the esteemed group of the 9 stars to which the Duke belongs. In response, Duke Agnes asserts that if that's his intention, he will personally demonstrate the merit of a spear, declaring that he will test Joshua's prowess. The protagonist knows that Agnes is one of the 9 stars, so he takes it as an opportunity that won't come again. Joshua then proposes that if he passes the test, the Duke has to accept the request he has made. Duke Agnes agrees to this condition, stating that should Joshua pass the test, he will be allowed to wield a spear and commit to addressing Joshua's specific request. However, if he achieves the opposing result, he must follow the Duke's command. The protagonist smirks, fully aware that the Duke will likely command him to attend the academy and focus on swordsmanship. Nevertheless, he is confident that this scenario won't transpire, as he harbors no intention of concealing his remarkable abilities. On the other hand, the Duchess seeks out a magician to establish a magical connection with her uncle through an oracle. As they exchange pleasantries and inquire about each other's welfare, her uncle probes whether the duchy is still a suitable place to reside. With a cunning glint in her eyes, she replies with a hint of malevolence, asserting that an incident has befallen the duchy, and she seeks to request a favor. Later, Joshua steps out of the Duke's room, acknowledging the impressive prowess of someone who holds the title of a master. He comments that the experience was remarkable and reveals that his body still trembles from the encounter. Shortly after, Babel arrives and approaches Joshua, requesting a conversation. When the protagonist declines, explaining that there's no matter to discuss, Babel's demeanor becomes more ominous as he conveys his intent to engage in another battle. Joshua perceives a distinct change in his brother's gaze, driven by an intense desire to triumph, a pure passion for combat, and an unwavering determination never to taste defeat. Then smirks in a concurring way and ponders whether Babel is confident about his decision. On the other hand, at the Kaltika Palace within the Avalon Empire's Grand Imperial Castle, a knight relays the entirety of the situation to Emperor Marcus van Britten. The Emperor contemplates whether it's indeed true that yet another child possessing the potential to become one of the stars has emerged